Welcome into KOIN Conversations. I'm Travis Ty, KOIN 6 morning anchor, and appreciate you taking the time here on KOIN Plus. It's going to be a lot of fun to dive into this topic today. On this show, we're going to really sink our teeth into a topic I think a lot of people are passionate about. I know I am. And if you're watching, there's a good chance you are too, and that is storytelling. Of course, it's what we do here at KOIN 6 in Portland, CW, and we're going to talk about multiple types of storytelling with that in mind. This is going to be a two-part episode where we range on different types of storytelling. We're going to go from fiction storytelling and novel writing to storytelling in journalism and talk about the state of the industry, too, of journalism. A lot of really good and interesting things to talk about here. And with that said, I have the perfect man for the job as we dive into all things storytelling. We have Dana Haynes here, author and journalist, man of many hats. Thank you for being a part of this conversation here on KOIN Conversations.
Oh, so glad to be here. This is awesome.
This is really fun. And I'm looking forward to talking about really all things novel and what you've done in the journalism realm, too. You are quite the writer, and you've been doing it for a very long time. So really do appreciate the time. Now, as I alluded to, Dana, you are a man of many hats. You have a decades-long journalism career, and at this point now, a decades-long award-winning novelist career, and that's where we're going to start here in part one. I want to talk about your career as a novelist and the work that you've been doing. Most recently, it's been your work with Des Limerick, Des Limerick series over the last few years, 3 books out and a 4th upcoming. And with that said, you may have seen, I know you brought some of the books in, if you want to hold that up for the camera. And I want to crack into several things. There you go. That's the first one of the series, The Gatekeeper. Now, you may be looking at the name on that, James Byrne. That's not your name. Yeah. Can I ask you about the pen name, why you went with the pen name for this novel?
So when I did the first one, and my literary agent at the time sold it to Minotaur St. Martin's Press, and I got a guy named Keith Kayla to be my editor, and Keith is legendary, with probably the best editor in the mystery realm in America. And he said, we'd like you to use a pen name. And I said, well, I'll do anything you want me to do. I'm fine, but why? And he said, because we're going to list you as a debut author. Instead of your 10th book, it'll be your first book, and there's certain marketing things we can do. There's some tricks in the toolbox for a new author. And so I said, well, okay, fine, I'll do that. So I did, and sure enough, that was the best sales I've ever had. So I'm a little bit jealous that James outsells Dana. I'm a little piqued about that, I'll be honest with you.
That's great.
And I'm actually a James. I'm a James Dana. So I thought I'd pick a name that I could remember. And then Byrne, because it sounds like an active verb and it's Irish, and it just ended up being a kind of a fun nickname. But my problem was I went to the first World Mystery Convention right after that book came out and got my name tag and was walking around, and a buddy of mine came up to me and said, Haynes, you got somebody else's name tag, you idiot. So
you're like, actually.
Yeah, funny story. So it's got some downsides. But
yeah, that's pretty great. Okay, let's dive into Des Limerick. It's one of your many books, and I want to dive into your earlier works as well, because I want to really learn about the works that, not that just that you've done, but how you've grown and how you've shaped yourself as an author. So I want to talk about that at some point. But I do want to talk about Des Limerick. This is the most recent series that you've been working on. Again, 3 books already published. You have a 4th in the works. If somebody hasn't read your work before, you're an award-winning mystery and thriller author. Take us into this world as a mystery writer and what you've created here with this Des Limerick series.
Well, I wanted to do a single male protagonist action-adventure book because I love those. I've been reading them. There's lots of guys out there that are really, really good. But I didn't want to do what they did. I had to do something different. So I played around, and I did about 8 or 9 iterations of this guy. He was American, then he wasn't. He was mid-50s, and then he was younger. He was an ex-cop, and then he was an ex-criminal. And it went on lots and lots and lots. I finally ended up with the Des that we know. He had different names, too. And he is ex-military, although I don't say which military, foreign military. And he was a breach artist. His job was to be a gatekeeper. His job is to open any door, keep it open as long as necessary, and control who does and does not get through it. That's his skill set. Now he's retired at 35 and wandering around the United States with a guitar and picking up musical gigs and getting into trouble. And there are so many good books in this genre that I had to come up with some things different. So making him an Englishman is a little bit different. And then setting him in a world of music is a little bit different. Mind you, I am absolutely not musical myself, so that takes the most research, much more than the terrorism. It's trying to find music. And then just giving him a skill set that I had not seen in another book before. And I thought, this is going to lend itself to just dozens and dozens of stories. And so far it has.
What is that process like to create a character that has now become pretty well known. You've been at
Yeah.
the top of Barnes and Noble selling lists, and so this is not a this is not a small task to come up with a character that really has some legs for not just one book, but a whole series, and again, possibly even some theatrical releases, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Very, very exciting to touch on that as well. But how do you go? What is the process like to create a character from scratch that you think that somebody can either relate to or just find exhilarating?
There's a process, and there's a technical term for it. It's called stupid. My process is stupid. I'm the only guy I know who does it quite like I do it. I'll come up with a basic idea, and then I will start writing. I'll do chapter 1, and literally, if I'm bored by it, I know it's wrong, and so I'll scrap it, and I'll change it and tweak it and make the character different, and then I'll try and write a few scenes with this scene, and I'll think, no, it's not quite there. I sometimes refer to it as the Rumpelstiltskin syndrome. Until you get it exactly right, it doesn't quite sing, and you'll change the name, and you'll change his age, and you'll change the setting, change the venue, change his skill set, and then one day you're writing and you realize, gosh, I got 10 pages down. I didn't even quite realize it. And you'll go back and look at it and think, oh no, I actually got 10 good pages. This is exciting. I can't wait to see what happens to this dude next. Because first rule of thumb is I'm my first reader. I write entirely to entertain me. And so once that happens, that a little bell goes off and says, this character's interesting. Go ahead and play with it. Stay with it. So then you write 30, 40, 50 pages, and then go back, stop it up 50 pages, and go back and reread it all and say, good, but this would be better. This is a nice setting, but I can tweak that setting a little bit, and it's going to lend itself to a better Act 2, and then rewrite those, see how that goes. My wife, Katie King, is, first off, much smarter than I am. and a writer of herself. And so then she reads them, and she's always terribly honest. She'll write CDB in the corner, can do better. Or that works. Or if I can make her laugh out loud, that's good news.
That's a moment.
So Katie King then reads them, and then if it's good, then I keep going forward.
So what's interesting, not that I've never written a novel, and I can't relate to that process, but I do. Of course, I write in the TV news world, right? That's my job. And whenever I do a feature story, so something longer than a 90-second day turn, for the daily news, really a 2, 3, maybe even 4-minute piece, I will work with the morning editor that I've worked with for years. Her name is Ruby. Just a gift of a talent, and it's so fun. And what's fun about that process too, when working, because I can write something, but I have the sound element. But my rule of thumb every time with her, and this is also when you work with somebody you trust, which you do with your wife, or I always tell her, anytime you're bored, let's cut it. The point of this is not to hear myself. The story has to be entertaining, and that's true across any medium. So I'm not a novelist, but I can relate to seeing things hit the cutting room floor.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
Do you see the video from your videographers and decide to change your story based on the images too?
Yeah, I do a lot of times. It depends on the story. So it's if I do always see the video beforehand. This is very feature specific. Sometimes if you're doing that day, maybe you're out on the. It's been a minute since I've been a day turn reporter. But if you're out on the road and you have that story needs to be filed by 3:30 in the afternoon because you're live at 4. There are things where as you're doing interviews or maybe even as you're driving in the car with your photographer, you're kind of writing a skeleton script.
Okay.
With the info, and then you kind of know where certain things are going to go. But you always listen to where the story takes you and make the adjustments from there. But you're trying to get ahead of the deadline as much as you can. And with the feature stories, depending on what it is, for example, I just did this story where I played in the All-Star game with the Portland Pickles. I put on the uniform, I had the bat, I was in the game mic'd up, right? So very light story, super fun to be a part of.
That's incredible.
But so I'm listening to all that audio. So the audio I put together, it wasn't a piece where I had my own track underneath it. I just put it, called it a nat pack, a natural sound package, where it's just sound from the day. It's not me ever coming in and now this, I never have that track. So that was a perfect example of me telling her, I have an idea as I'm putting it on paper what it's going to sound like, but it's always going to move and feel a little different once you actually see it on the video timeline. And that's a perfect example of when I told Ruby, the editor, hey, the second you're bored, then cut it. So yeah, that's a little peek behind the scenes into the TV news world. But I can see that in the novel process too, and I want to ask you about that process because we always hear the process, the writing process. Is that a real thing? Do you have an outline, or is your process just I'm going to start at chapter 1 and I'm just going to see where my imagination takes me?
Every writer I know has a slightly different process, and they can vary differently. And when I teach writing, I often tell people never, ever, ever, ever believe anybody who says to you there's only one way to write, because it's just not true. And so, oddly enough, believe it or not, longhand on a steno pad. That's my first draft. I write longhand.
Tell me you're a journalist without telling me you're a journalist.
Yeah, exactly, right, yeah, because I've been in 12 million school board meetings and county commission meetings with a steno pad, so I'm really comfortable with that medium. So that's how I start. Secondly, on a steno pad, I can get 350 words on a page, and that gives me my metronome. Either my pacing is too slow or it's too fast. I better have some character development or plot development or a joke or a lead into a clue, a setup. And if I don't have it in 350 words, I need to pick up my pace. So it gives me my metronome. I am not a plotter. And I'm an ex-theater guy, so I always know like Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 of the books. And I know the primary action sequence that gets me from Act 1 to Act 2. And I occasionally, like with Crashers, that was one of my earlier books, I absolutely knew the plot point that would give me Act 2 to Act 3, but I never know Act 3 till I get to it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, then let's talk about some of these other works too. And I mean, total confession here. I've read at least 8 or 9 of your books. I have a list of them out here, and this was really fun. So maybe a little background to you and I, Dana. We started in some ways working together when. I worked with you as a producer here at KOIN.
Right.
While you were at the Portland Tribune, and we brought you in many times as a political analyst and political expert for many of our shows, whether it was an election special or debates, things of that nature. So yeah, it was a fun way to get to know each other and kind of pick each other's brains. And then I found out through one of those conversations, I think we had a table meeting before one of our specials we did with Ken Boddy, and found out that you're an author, and quite frankly, some people throw out that term, and I'm not trying to belittle, but like if I were to write a short story, I could say I'm a writer, but it's like wait, this guy's legit, right? This guy's legit, and so Crashers was really, I would argue, and please correct me if I'm wrong, your first big one.
Yeah.
The one that really kind of puts you on the map. Crashers, for those who haven't read it, and please fill in the gaps here. What was fun as a local reader is that it is so local. It's about a plane that goes down and the investigation team that comes in, and of course you add in some drama around the scene at play after a plane goes down. I believe it was in Marion County, if I remember that off the top of my head.
That's right.
What was that process like to put yourself on the map with Crashers? I believe was that 15 years ago now?
2010.
2010.
So, gosh, you're right.
So, how the time is flying. But what was that experience like to put together Crashers, what really feels like your first big novel to hit the scene?
I have always been a character-driven writer. I write about a character to whom something interesting happens. And that was my first attempt to try and be a plot-driven writer. The plane falls from the sky, and they put together, the National Transportation Safety Board puts together a go team. Come out here, you got pilots and engineers and the cockpit voice recorder expert and the data recorder expert, and all these people have to come together, and if they weren't available, another team would come in. So it was very driven by the plot. So that was my first effort. Secondly, I am not a technically oriented person. I'm not a person who owns like a toolkit. I just, unless you count toothbrush as tools, I don't have any, right? So I took a year to do research into how airplanes work and how engines work and how the reverser work and the blocker doors work on an engine. And I got schematics. And I found out that anybody can find tapes from the NTSB of cockpit voice recordings and conversations between pilots and towers. And so I listened to just dozens and dozens and dozens of those. And again, I knew my Act 1 plot point, that the plane was going to fall out of the sky. I'm not giving anything away. It happens in Chapter 2. And then I knew the big old plot point, and I had it in my head for years and years and years to get.
Really?
Yeah, the landing.
Uh-huh.
I land an airplane on I-5
Yep.
in a storm, and then turn it around and take it off again. And I had that in my head since I was 19 years old. I always knew I wanted to do that scene.
Seriously? So you didn't know the story around it necessarily,
No.
but you had that plot point in your head since you were 19.
I worked on the ramp at the Boise airport right after high school. I was one of the guys who put food on the airplanes, that took food trays off airplanes. And I was after shift, and it was one of those high desert storms where there's really, really low clouds and the rain just coming down. And I was walking to my car, and I looked up, and an airplane broke through the cloud barrier, and it had no audio signature until it did. It went boom right over my head, and it was trailing two horizontal tornadoes of rainwater stuck in its thrust vortices. And I remember watching it going thinking, that's a scene. I'm going to write that someday.
Wow.
And then 20 some odd years later, I finally figured out the right story to tell that one.
That's incredible.
So I had tucked that sucker away for a long time.
Do you have anything else like that that's cooking right now? Is
Oh,
there
always.
like do you want to reveal, or do we want to keep it? We can keep if they're going to be in a book, we can keep that as a nugget to hide.
The book that's going to come out in January, one of my favorite all-time novels, and one of the very few breaks the rules, is also a great movie, was The Andromeda Strain, Michael Crichton. And one of the things I love about the book, and they replicate it brilliantly in the movie, is it takes a third of the movie or more to get down into the laboratory where they're going to study this thing, this bug that's come down in a satellite from space. A third of the book is getting there.
Wow.
So with this book that's going to come out in January, I set it in a underground neutrino facility that's inside a mine, and a third of the book is Des trying to get to Newfoundland with a Go team and to get down inside it. So I thought if you've got a gatekeeper, sometimes his skill is getting to the door.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that was the very first thing. That was the very first plot idea. Then I remembered Michael Crichton's brilliant book and a tremendous movie, and thought, okay, that'll be fun. Let's do a book in which it takes me a third of the book for him to get to the damn door, and then the gatekeeper gets to do his job.
It's about the journey sometimes. Sometimes it's about the journey.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, let's dive into what I think is a fascinating piece of what you've done. And I've told this to you offline. This is not going to be news to you, to your face here. But one of the things I've always appreciated about all your works here, whether it's Crashers, whether it's the St. Nicholas series, and, of course, with the Des Limerick series, is you can feel your research because you're just so immersed as the reader. I remember specifically thinking, well, I'll say this. I want to go to Cyprus because of you, which, if you haven't read the books, it's a key place in the first St. Nicholas book, and Salvage and Wrecking. And I remember instantly thinking like, oh, well, this place sounds cool, and I want to go visit Cyprus. And then with Des, for example, I believe the first word, and I haven't read it since it came out, so this is going off of memory. I think the first word he says is ta, which is very indicative of not only his ethnic background, but really just how short it is. Like, that's kind of who it just brought me into his personality so fast, right? The grittiness, just he was a man of few unspoken words if he was in the spot where he could be that way and be himself that way. And you do that with all your books. You bring readers into this physical environment that is so real. And so I just want to ask how you do that.
Well, let me say first, one thing about Des's dialogue is that he's got street patois, and he uses really bad English. And I'm a copy editor. It's in my DNA. And I almost break a bone trying to put bad English into a book. You will pull a muscle using what instead of who. It's terrible. So that's been one of the hardest parts of it. My wife just laughs about, because I'm such a stickler for AP style and grammar.
It's been your profession.
Yeah, right. So that's really tough. And then secondly, I've gotten incredibly lucky. I mean, the luckiest guy in the whole world. And one of the ways I'm lucky is I had dear friend Tim King. And Tim had worked for United Airlines. He also had worked on the ramp. And he could fly places on the cheap because he was a United Airline employee for 30 years. And Tim went with me to Cyprus. He's also gregarious as heck. He'll walk up to bartenders and clerks and just start conversations in ways that I have trouble with. He and I went to the former Yugoslavia. He and I went to Germany and Austria and Slovakia together. We went to Scotland and England together. And because I could travel with this guy on the cheap, I got to go to places and do some research that you cannot do on the internet. I mean, you can't know what the cigarette packets look like in Milan, or that there are 4 different independent police forces in the city of Milan in Italy, representing the city, the government, the church, and the Lombardy region. You would never get that just unless you're sitting there. And so the stuff that I was able to get because of my friendship with Tim King has been tremendous fun, and then it gives me this je ne sais quoi. It gives me this ability to just go to a place and absorb information. And quite often I don't go with a specific plot in mind. I will go to a place like Cyprus, which is 2/3 owned by the Greeks and 1/3 owned by the Turks because of a war in 1974. It still has the Checkpoint Charlie in in Nicosia, where you hand your passport to the Greek authorities, walk 40 paces, hand it to the Turkish authorities, and go through
Wow.
the checkpoints. And so I went with Tim knowing that there was going to be great stories, but not knowing which stories it was going to be. And then I got back, thought, now I know what they're going to be.
Going in with an open mind, just ready to be a sponge.
Yeah.
And just absorb all that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, I do want to talk about just books that have stuck out to you, and whether this is a story you've crafted or just maybe along the career. You know, again, I kind of alluded to Crashers really feeling like that one where, okay, Dana Haynes has arrived on the scene. What is a turning point for you in your career with one of your novels where you're like, oh, I'm really moving forward in this industry?
The route by which Crashers got to the bookshelf was, I think, really, really, really interesting. Hopefully other people think it's interesting too. I wrote it and got it all finished and then went and found a literary agent for it in New York. And the literary agent said, oh my God, this book is tremendous. It's great. I want to sell it immediately to one of the big publishers. I'm going to make sure there's sequels because it's going to lend itself to that. And then we're going to go after Hollywood because I just think it's a Hollywood thing. I think it's great. And that was in August of 2001. In September of 2001, a book about multiple airplanes falling out of the sky became the most unmarketable book in the world.
Yeah.
So we had to put it on a shelf for 7 years.
Wow.
So I wrote it and then couldn't sell it for 7 years until we were past 9/11.
Wow.
Yeah. So that I had this thing on my shelf. I knew it was good. I'd had this one literary agent who subsequently didn't stay with me. And I knew it was I knew it was good if I could just get past the fact that all the publishers are in Manhattan. All the publishers are in Ground Zero. So about 7 years later, I needed to get another literary agent. And pause. Anybody who tells you that luck isn't a factor in this business is lying.
Oh,
luck
that's
is
honesty.
Totally a factor.
What about it?
So I sent query letters to agents in New York City. Dozens and dozens and dozens of query letters. One of them called me back, and she said, Dana Haynes, is there any chance you were the editor of the West Lynn Tidings? I used to live in West Lynn. I hated your paper. Sure, I'll look at your manuscript.
What?
Yeah, by sheer luck, I was the one query that she got that week.
Wait, but she hated your paper?
No, she completely hated
and
my.
And then how did that rope her in then?
She remembered me from being from West Lynn, and she didn't like the newspaper, but she remembered my writing, and she remembered that it was always well edited.
Wow.
She just didn't like my political positions. So she said, yeah, I'll look at your book. So she did, and 10 weeks later, she sold that and a sequel, and then she sold the next 10 subsequent books, or 9 subsequent books. Janet has subsequently passed away, but she...
Sorry.
Having a story that I knew if I could get in front of the right eyes was going to sell, and then the pure luck of getting a great agent like Janet Reed, that was the turning point for me.
Stars align.
Yeah.
Stars align sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to take a quick break, but I do want to dive into several topics on the other side of this break.
All right.
I want to talk a little bit more about the process of going from your notepad that you to a book, and then that book going to the shelf, and then the very exciting news of a book possibly turning into a theatrical release movie there. So we have all kinds of things to talk about with Dana Haynes. Quick break coming up. We're going to talk about all that on the other side. Welcome back to this episode of KOIN Conversations. Once again, I have author and journalist Dana Haynes here as we are talking about all things his works from novels, and then in part 2, we're going to talk about his work in the field of journalism, which is extensive. But we left off, Dana, talking about many of your works, and I'm going to go back to the most recent, which is your Des Limerick series. And again, you have your 4th book coming out in January, which I also want to touch on, and congratulations with that. I want to talk about the process here, not the writing process, but the process of an author going from this notepad to a book, to that book actually being on the shelf at Powell's, to this book possibly even turning into a theatrical release, which is something that is on the radar here, and maybe even more so. So we're going to dive into all that. So take me through this. What is the behind the curtain peek here as you go through publishing a novel and bringing it, to the big stage?
I always assumed that the job of the literary agent was to find you a publisher, but Janet and my current literary agent, who's John Talbot, they both believe that they tried to hook up a writer with an editor, a specific editor. So in this case, Janet, with Crashers, said there's a guy out there, his name is Keith Kayla. She didn't tell me that he's Minotaur St. Martin's Press. She didn't try and hook me with them. She said, he's going to get your humor. He's going to get your action sequences. He's the guy I want editing your books. So she took it to him exclusively and no other publishing house. Keith got it, liked it a lot, bought a sequel, and then bought 2 more books, kind of vaguely, that are more or less sequels. But that was the burst. She hooked me up with exactly the right editor. Keith is legendary. He's amongst the finest editors in all of the mystery realm. He also happens to be just a hilarious dude. If you go and get a beer with him, I'm going to see him in New Orleans next month at the World Mystery Convention.
Great.
And he's hilarious with encyclopedic knowledge of 1980s trivia. So he's both a great editor and just a dude.
Has a bank. Bring him to trivia night
Oh
every
yeah,
once in a while.
man. He's great. So that's the first process. Then the publishers do ask you questions from time to time, but they don't always listen to you. They'll say, "This is the cover we like. We hope you like it too," which is not the same as, "Are you okay with this cover?" It's, "This is the cover. Hope you like it."
How tough is that to get? It's not even feedback. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
we're just changing your story some here and there.
I pushed back on one of the books. It was one of the Des books. I said, "I just think this cover's terrible, and here's why I don't like it." And they said, "Oh, looking at it through your eyes, we see you're probably all right. We will ditch that one." So that was one. But more often than not, I don't really get much say in those things.
Interesting.
They then have a marketing department, and they say, "This is how we're going to market your book. This is how we're going to promote your book." They will, from time to time, say, "We'd like you to. We're going to hook you up with a podcaster. We're going to hook you up with a bookstore." As you and I are talking, about 3 days from now, I'm going to head down to Orange, California with another Minotaur writer, Bruce Borges, and we're going to go to the book carnival and do an event together down there.
Okay.
Those are I more or less am a good soldier. At this point,
Yeah.
I'm cheap manual labor. I'll do the things they tell me to do because my skill set does not include marketing.
Sure.
And so,
But that's what they're there for.
Yeah, that's
the whole thing.
And so if I walk into a store and they don't have my book, I can call a guy at Minotaur and say, "Hey, Barnes & Noble in Portland, Oregon doesn't have the book." And then they will call and say, "Gee, our ad rep didn't get that book to you. Let me make sure it happens." So I have an advantage that a self-published author doesn't have. I have a team of people to whom I can ask questions, but who also will tell me, "This is the right thing to do, Haynes. Go do this thing."
Sure.
And that's how the entire process. I am sort of just do as I'm told. I'll salute smartly and go speak where they want me to speak because these guys know this stuff and I don't.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, take me through what's now a new process for you. What you have not done is experienced fully the process of taking one of your books and turning it in to a movie, which is something every author, I would imagine, dreams of.
Right.
But this dream could be reality for you. Start from square one with this process because, full disclosure, there was a day where Dana emailed myself and a couple others here at KOIN just saying like, "Hey, update, MGM is getting involved with Des Limerick." So take it from there, Dana. What's going on?
Let me start by saying every writer knows the same rule, which is don't get your hopes up. Every Hollywood deal falls apart, always. The great literary agent Barbara Poel always used to say, if Hollywood comes asking about your books, what you should think of yourself as a goat herder. And one day you go down to the goat barn and one of your goats is turned into a unicorn. Don't make eye contact with the unicorn. Keep feeding your goats. Keep watering your goats. And in a month, that'll turn back into a goat again because the things always fall apart. I'm a little bit farther in the process than I've ever dreamt I would be. So I have a Hollywood agent as well, a guy named Poya, and he said, "There's a producer who has read your books. I got him in front of him, and he loves your books, and he wants to meet with you via Zoom." And the guy, Lorenzo Di Bonaventura, used to run Warner Brothers. He's the guy who brought Harry Potter to Warner Brothers. And
that worked out pretty well.
Yeah, he made a dime or two off those. Yeah. And so we met, and he talked, and he'd clearly read the books. One of the cliches of Hollywood is nobody actually reads, but he clearly
I was going to ask.
Yeah, he clearly had read the books. And then he said, we're going to get a real screenwriter because we don't want you to write it because that's not your skill set. So we had a next meeting with him and a screenwriter. The screenwriter's name was Brian Helgeland. And if that rings any bells, it's because he co-won the Oscar for L.A. Confidential, which to my mind is one of the great scripts in the history of that town.
So good.
Brilliant script. So we met. He had clearly read the books, and there were weird, odd, funny little things that he liked. And he said, "Yeah." Now remember, a book is 400 pages, and a screenplay is going to come in at 119, 118.
Okay.
So he told me, he said, "There are going to be things I'm going to change, and things that's
I would imagine just have to get cut.
Yeah.
For the sake of time.
So Katie and I got to see the screenplay. And I think it's really, really good.
How
And-
surreal was that experience, first of all, to see a screenplay with your title on it?
Yes, somebody else was playing with my toys.
Yeah.
That was weird. And entire characters that he'd removed, and other characters who hadn't been terribly important that he updated. But the thing that I was really, really proud of is that a lot of my dialogue survived. So my dialogue is in his script throughout, which really, if a guy named Helgelin is using your dialogue, you've done something
You're
right.
doing something right.
Yeah,
That's,
so that was important. Now there's a director who I think is attached. His contract isn't done yet. And so I'll be meeting with him in the next 3-4 weeks, again, probably via Zoom. One of my favorite stories about this whole thing is when I met with the producer and the writer, they said, we want you involved. We want your input. We want you to know what's going on. We're going to run ideas past you. When it comes to casting, you're going to be part of this. I said, that's great. Everybody hung up. My literary agent called me back, Puya, and said they didn't mean any of that. Never ever talk to them again. They don't care what you think. They bought your product. Yeah, you're dead to them. So I said, I actually got that subtext, but it was nice of them to pretend.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Although I will say the publisher has subsequently read my third novel and called me and said, I love your third one. If the first one does well, it looks like a sequel to me.
Really?
So Amazon MGM is a big studio. They still do theatrical releases, which is what this is scheduled for. And Amazon likes to hire a director first and then stars. So if the director's contract comes about, and we think it's going to, next thing we'll be casting, and then after that is when they really say, okay, now this thing is, to use the colloquialism, greenlit. Mm-hmm. So it can still fall apart. It could still go south on me. And so Katie and I always have a bottle of champagne in the refrigerator. And every time we have a little bit of good news, incremental as it might be, we pop a cork.
Yeah.
Because we assume the thing at some point, the wheels will fall off this thing, because they always do.
But celebrate along the way.
But in the meantime, we pop a cork for every incremental win.
I love that attitude, and we don't have a ton of time left, but I do want. I mean, going back, and you touched on this some, but just the amount of input you have on a screenplay. I feel like as a plebeian that reads and watches movies but has never been on the other side of those things, you kind of hear these myths about how much input or the lack of input an author has when their book turns into a movie or a show. What level of involvement do you have? I mean, I know that you saw the screenplay. Were you allowed to say, hey, I got my red pen, I'm going to make some changes? Or is it just for your viewing pleasure?
I think it was for my viewing pleasure. And
Yeah.
if this was my 10th adaptation, then they would listen to me, and I would probably have an office in L.A. I mean, there are some writers who have tons and tons of works get made into TV shows and movies. Those guys, they actually have input. This is my first rodeo, or rodeo, I suppose. And so at this point, I'm really hands off. I'm just they're being very polite to me and very nice to me, but that's all.
Oh,
and so if I get to go down, and if they ever make this thing and I get to go be down on the set, that would be fun. I will tell you, the book, it's based on my second novel, and it takes place in Portland, Oregon, and in the Gorge and in Astoria. So if it looks like it's greenlit, we're going to contact the governor's office and say they better film it here.
Film it here.
Yeah, we're going to lobby hard for it to be filmed here.
I love that. I know there's a movie being filmed, and I can't remember the name of it, but it has Russell Crowe in it. It's being filmed in Bavaria, but it's about it's set in 1800s Oregon. So keep me posted on that. That'll be interesting to learn about. Okay, I know that we got to wrap things up, and we're going to talk about another conversation that I'm excited about, which is your journalistic career and how this is interwoven to your novelist career. Yeah. And I want to talk about the state of the industry. So those are all things we're going to talk about in part 2. But real quick, before I let you go, we got to do this kind of rapid fire style. But it's one of my favorite conversations to bring up over beers with people at a table. If you're just having a good time and you're looking for a conversation starter. Your favorite and least favorite book to movie adaptations. Now that you're experiencing the other side, what is, as a casual viewer, what's your favorite and least favorite?
I've actually touched on it, and it's L.A. Confidential, because those of you who've read the novel, it's 900 pages and about 900 characters and about 19 different plots, and it's unfilmable. And so Helgeland and his co-writer, whose name escapes me the very second, they had to figure out what 94% of that book to take out to find the gem that. And it's like, if you're a cook, it's like, how do you make a sauce?
Whittle it down?
How do you whittle it down? How do you make that sauce come together? And they took, I swear, 7% of that book and made that movie, which is a brilliant, I think it was unfilmable book.
Yeah.
And they made it into
if you did it the way that it was
good Lord.
Written as a book. Yeah.
Oh, good Lord.
My favorite, which is maybe a cliche answer, but is Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay.
I think the books are perfect.
Yeah.
We're also kind of in when I'm not reading, the mystery thriller, I'm reading a lot of the fantasy genre.
Sure.
And what Peter Jackson did, I think what he did with those movies, which is not an original take. These movies came out how long ago, right?
Yeah.
But his adaptations do just a brilliant job of doing justice to the themes and the plots and the characters and building them up the correct way. But it's kind of what you said about LA Confidential, the things that he chooses to leave out. But maybe if you've read the books and watched the movies, you get the little tribute, the little homage, the little touch to what he's alluding to. But if you haven't, it's fine.
Yeah.
You can still experience the movie. I think that's brilliant.
I like that one.
My least favorite, then I'm going to toss it to you, and then we do have to wrap this up for part 2, is Ready Player One. That was one of my COVID reads, and I loved the book. It wasn't necessarily one of my favorite books of all time, but I loved the book. I had so much fun. The video game, the nostalgia that's brought out of that, and the movie just was a total left turn. And I will say this: one of the things that I struggle with a bad book to movie adaptation is when I understand that changes have to be made. I've always been open and okay with that. It's a different medium. This isn't a book; it's a movie. But when you are changing storylines so drastically and removing characters and to in my opinion, to change a story for the sake of changing the story, it irked me. Ready Player One got me. What's one that got you?
I absolutely love the Victorian novel Dracula. I think it's a great, great novel. It's been made into 12,000 movies. None of them did what the book did.
Really?
Nobody's ever adapted that as well as Bram Stoker's book. It's just a great, great read. And I see all the versions, too, because I love that story. And every one of them falls apart.
I'm glad I asked the question because that is a dark horse take. There are not many people who would have said Dracula. Okay, that is the end of part 1 here. Again, we're going to wrap things up with part 2 where we continue the conversation about storytelling, but this time in the medium of journalism. Dana has an extensive career as a journalist, not just a novelist. The man doesn't stop writing. So we're going to talk about all of that coming up on the other side. Again, part 2 in the queue.